Hello everyone, welcome back to Shadow Script, the place where we dive into the most terrifying real-life experiences that will keep you awake at night. Today, I'm going to share with you the terrifying story of a young woman named Olivia from California, United States. What you're about to hear is her real experience, and trust me, it's one of the scariest doll encounters I've ever come across. But before we begin, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Also, let me know in the comments below which city or country you're watching from. I love connecting with all of you. Now, this is Olivia's story, a story about an antique doll. She brought home a decision that nearly destroyed her life. If you think dolls are just harmless toys, think again. So grab your blankets, turn off the lights, and prepare yourself for a journey into pure horror. It all started on a rainy Saturday afternoon in October. I had been browsing through an old antique shop on the outskirts of town, looking for unique pieces to decorate my new apartment. The shop was one of those places that felt frozen in time. Dusty shelves lined with forgotten treasures, creaky wooden floors that groaned with every step. The elderly shopkeeper, M.R.S. Rodriguez, watched me from behind thick glasses as I wandered through the narrow aisles. Her presence felt heavy, almost warning, but I was too absorbed in my search to pay attention to the signs. That's when I saw her. Sitting alone on a high shelf in the darkest corner of the shop was the most beautiful doll I had ever seen. She was about 2 feet tall, with porcelain skin so perfect it looked almost real. Her auburn hair was styled in perfect ringlets that cascaded past her shoulders. She wore a Victorian-era dress, deep burgundy velvet with intricate lace details, but it was her eyes that captivated me most. They were the most striking shade of emerald green, and they seemed to follow me as I moved closer. I reached up to touch her, and I swear I felt warmth emanating from the porcelain. It was impossible, but I felt it nonetheless. "How much for this doll?" I asked M.R.S. Rodriguez, pointing up at the shelf. The old woman's face immediately changed. Her warm smile disappeared, replaced by a look of genuine concern. She shook her head slowly. "Oh no, dear. You don't want that one. She's not for sale." "But everything in here has a price tag," I insisted, looking closer at the doll. "I don't see one on her, but surely." "Listen to me carefully," M.R.S. Rodriguez said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "That doll has been returned to me 7 times over the past 15 years. 7 different families, and each time something terrible happened." I laughed it off. I thought she was just trying to create some mystique to drive up the price. These antique dealers, they all had their stories. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? It's just a doll. The old woman stared at me for a long moment, then sighed heavily. I could see the resignation in her eyes. $500, she said finally. "But I'm warning you, if you take her home, you need to bring her back the moment anything strange happens. Promise me that." I promised, though I had no intention of keeping that promise. I was moving to a new city in 3 weeks anyway. What was the worst that could happen? I should have listened to her. I should have walked away. That evening, I carefully placed the doll on my bedroom dresser. I had decided to call her Elizabeth. It seemed to suit her Victorian appearance. In the soft lamplight of my bedroom, she looked even more beautiful than she had in the shop. I spent some time arranging her dress, making sure every fold of velvet was perfect. Her glass eyes seemed to watch my every movement, but I attributed that to the craftsmanship. Whoever had made this doll was truly an artist. "Well, Elizabeth," I said to her as I prepared for bed, "I hope you like your new home." I swear I saw her lips twitch into the faintest hint of a smile, but when I looked again, her expression was exactly the same as before. Just my imagination, I told myself. I fell asleep easily that night, completely unaware that my life was about to become a living nightmare. The first sign that something was wrong came at exactly 3:17 a.m. I woke up to the sound of soft humming. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, maybe a neighbor who couldn't sleep. But as I became more alert, I realized the sound was coming from inside my bedroom. I sat up in bed, my heart already beginning to race. The humming was coming from the direction of my dresser, where Elizabeth sat. In the darkness, I could just make out her silhouette. She appeared to be in exactly the same position I had left her. But the humming continued. It was a lullaby, soft and melodic, but there was something deeply unsettling about it. I turned on my bedside lamp, and the humming stopped immediately. Elizabeth sat motionless on the dresser, her glass eyes staring straight ahead. Everything looked exactly as I had left it. I stared at her for several minutes, waiting for some sign of movement, but there was nothing. "I'm losing my mind," I whispered to myself, turning off the light and lying back down. But sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the old building, every rustle of wind outside, seemed magnified. I found myself straining my ears, waiting for that haunting lullaby to begin again. Just as I was finally drifting off to sleep, I heard it again. This time, I didn't turn on the light. I lay perfectly still, listening to the soft, melodic humming that filled my bedroom. It was definitely coming from Elizabeth's direction, but how was it possible? The humming continued for what felt like hours, sometimes soft and soothing, other times taking on an almost sinister quality. I must have eventually fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through my bedroom windows. I immediately looked over at Elizabeth. She sat exactly where I had placed her, but something felt different. I couldn't put my finger on what it was at first, then I noticed it. Her head was turned slightly, just a few degrees to the right. Not enough for most people to notice, but I remembered the exact position I had left her in. I had been very particular about her placement. My hands were shaking as I approached the dresser. I told myself that maybe the old building had settled during the night. Maybe vibrations had shifted her position slightly. There had to be a logical explanation. I carefully turned Elizabeth's head back to its original position, and that's when I felt it again. That impossible warmth radiating from a porcelain, as if there was something alive beneath the surface. The second night was worse. I had spent the entire day trying to convince myself that I was imagining things. I threw myself into work, kept my mind busy, but as evening approached, I found myself dreading going home. I decided to move Elizabeth to the living room, thinking that maybe having her out of my bedroom would help me sleep better. I placed her on a mantelpiece above my fireplace, positioning her so she was facing away from the couch, where I liked to relax in the evenings. But even from across the room, I could feel her presence. It was as if those glass eyes were boring into the back of my head, watching my every movement. Around 11 p.m., I decided to go to bed early. I needed sleep, and I was determined not to let an antique doll control my life. As I passed through the living room on my way to the bedroom, I glanced at Elizabeth one more time. She was exactly where I had left her, facing the wall. I went to bed, but sleep was elusive. Every sound seemed amplified. Every shadow seemed to move. I found myself lying awake, straining my ears for any sign of that haunting lullaby. At 2:45 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not the soft humming from the night before, but actual footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving across my living room floor. The old hardwood creaked with each step, just like when I walked across it during the day. My blood ran cold. I lived on the 3rd floor of a secure building. There was no way anyone could have gotten into my apartment. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside my bed and slowly crept toward my bedroom door. The footsteps had stopped. I pressed my ear against the door, listening intently. Nothing. Complete silence. After what felt like an eternity, I slowly turned the doorknob and cracked the door open. The living room was dark, illuminated only by the street lights filtering through the windows. Everything appeared normal. Then I saw Elizabeth. She was no longer on the mantelpiece. She was standing, yes, standing, in the middle of my living room floor. Her back was to me, and she was perfectly motionless, but she was definitely standing upright. I blinked hard, certain that my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when I opened them, she was still there. My hands were trembling so violently that I nearly dropped the bat. This was impossible. Dolls don't move. Dolls don't stand up by themselves. There had to be an explanation. I flipped on the living room light, and Elizabeth immediately toppled over, landing face down on the carpet with a soft thud. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, an inanimate antique doll. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had heard. I carefully picked her up, and her porcelain skin felt ice cold. Not the impossible warmth I had felt before, but genuinely cold, like touching a tombstone in winter. I placed her back on a mantelpiece, this time facing outward, so I could see her from my bedroom doorway. I spent the rest of the night sitting up in bed, watching that doorway, waiting for any sign of movement. By the third day, I was exhausted. Dark circles had formed under my eyes, and my hands had developed a constant tremor. My coworkers noticed a change in my appearance, asking if I was feeling all right. But how could I explain what was happening? That evening, I decided to do some research. I searched online for any information about the antique shop where I had bought Elizabeth, any history about cursed or haunted dolls, anything that might explain what I was experiencing. What I found made my blood run cold. There were multiple forum posts and news articles dating back over a decade, all describing similar experiences, with a doll matching Elizabeth's exact description. A Victorian-era porcelain doll with auburn hair and emerald green eyes, always sold from the same antique shop, always returned within days or weeks. One post from 2018 described how the doll would move around the house at night, humming lullabies and standing in different positions. The family had young children, and they reported that the doll would appear in their kids' bedrooms, standing over their beds while they slept. Another post from 2020 told an even more disturbing story. A woman named Ashley had bought the doll for her daughter's birthday. Within a week, her daughter had become withdrawn and started talking to someone who wasn't there. She claimed the doll told her secrets, dark secrets about people who had owned her before. The daughter began having violent nightmares, waking up screaming about a lady in a red dress who wanted to play forever. The family returned the doll after their daughter was found sleepwalking, trying to leave the house in the middle of the night, claiming the doll had told her to come outside. But the most terrifying post was from just last year. A man named Daniel had inherited the doll from his deceased grandmother's estate, not knowing its history. He described escalating paranormal activity over several weeks, culminating in what he called a complete psychological breakdown. Daniel claimed that the doll had somehow gotten inside his head, influencing his thoughts and dreams. He wrote about waking up to find scratches on his arms, messages written in his own handwriting that he didn't remember writing, and an overwhelming urge to hurt himself. The post ended abruptly with Daniel saying he was going to destroy the doll, burn it in his backyard, no matter what happened to him. There were no follow-up posts from his account. As I read these stories, I realized that Elizabeth had a pattern. She started slowly, testing her new owners, gauging their reactions. The humming and movement were just the beginning. I had to get rid of her. But as I closed my laptop and looked toward the living room, I realized something that made my heart stop. Elizabeth was no longer on the mantelpiece. I searched every inch of my apartment, the bedroom, the bathroom, kitchen, even the closets. Elizabeth was nowhere to be found. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. But that was impossible. Dolls don't disappear by themselves. Someone had to have moved her. But I lived alone, and my apartment was still securely locked from the inside. As I searched, I kept hearing sounds, soft creaking from different rooms, as if someone was walking just out of sight. But every time I investigated, I found nothing. The sun was setting, and I was becoming increasingly frantic. The thought of spending another night in the apartment with Elizabeth missing, possibly hiding somewhere, was unbearable. I decided to call MRS, Rodriguez at the antique shop. Maybe she would have some advice, or at least be willing to take the doll back. The phone rang several times before she answered. Hello. Her voice sounded tired, wary. MRS Rodriguez, this is Olivia. I bought a doll from your shop 3 days ago. The Victorian one with green eyes. I need to return her. There was a long pause before she responded. What's happened? I told her everything. The humming, the moving, the online stories I had found. I expected her to think I was crazy, but instead, she listened in complete silence. Where's the doll now? She asked when I finished. I don't know. She's disappeared. I can't find her anywhere in my apartment. Another long pause. Listen to me very carefully, MRS Rodriguez said, her voice urgent. You need to get out of that apartment right now. Don't pack anything. Don't look for her. Just leave. Go to a hotel, Anywhere but there. Can you do that? But why? What's wrong? What is she? I can't explain over the phone. Just promise me you'll leave right now. I'll meet you tomorrow morning. We'll figure out how to fix this. But tonight, you cannot be alone with her. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. MRS. Rodriguez's terror had been palpable through the phone, and that scared me more than anything I had experienced so far. I grabbed my car keys and headed for the door, but as I reached for the deadbolt, I heard it. That soft, melodic humming. It was coming from my bedroom. Every instinct told me to run, to get out of the apartment immediately. But something else, something I couldn't explain, was drawing me toward that sound. It was as if Elizabeth was calling to me, compelling me to come to her. I found myself walking slowly down the hallway toward my bedroom, even though my rational mind was screaming at me to leave. The humming grew louder as I approached, taking on an almost hypnotic quality. My bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I could see a soft glow emanating from within. Not the harsh light from my lamp, but something warmer, more inviting. I pushed the door open, and my heart nearly stopped. Elizabeth was sitting on my bed, in the exact center, her legs crossed delicately in front of her. She was glowing, literally glowing with a soft, ethereal light. Her emerald eyes were no longer glass. They were alive, moving, tracking my every movement. And she was smiling, not the painted smile that had been on her porcelain face, but a real, genuine smile that revealed tiny, perfect white teeth. "Hello, Olivia," she said in a voice like tinkling bells. "I've been waiting for you." I tried to scream, tried to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move, unable to look away from those living eyes. "Don't be afraid," Elizabeth continued, tilting her head in an almost childlike gesture. "I just want to be your friend. I've been so lonely, moving from house to house, never staying anywhere long enough to make a real connection." "You're not real," I managed to whisper. "Dolls don't talk. Dolls don't move." Elizabeth laughed, a sound that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. "Oh, but I am real, Olivia. More real than you might think. You see, I wasn't always like this. Once, a very long time ago, I was just like you. I was alive." She stood up on the bed, her movements fluid and graceful, completely at odds with what she should have been able to do. "My name was Elizabeth Hartwell. I lived in Boston in 1847 with my parents and younger brother. I was 8 years old when the fever took me. Scarlet fever, such a common killer of children in those days." She began walking across the bed, never taking her eyes off me. "But I didn't want to die, Olivia. I wasn't ready to leave. So when the darkness came for me, I fought it. I clung to life with everything I had, and somehow I managed to stay." Elizabeth stepped down from the bed, moving closer to me with each word. "The doll you bought, it was made in my image, created by a grieving mother who had lost her own daughter, made to look exactly like me when I was alive. And because of my desperate desire to remain in this world, I became bound to it." She was only a few feet away now, and I could see details that hadn't been there before. Her skin looked soft and warm, not porcelain at all. Her hair moved slightly, as if stirred by an invisible breeze. For over 170 years, I've been trapped in this form, passed from owner to owner, never able to truly live again. But I've learned things, Olivia. I've learned how to influence the world around me, how to touch the minds of those who possess my vessel. What do you want from me?" I whispered. Elizabeth's smile widened, and for the first time, I saw something cruel in her expression. "I want to live again, Olivia. Really live. And you're going to help me." The room began to spin around me. Elizabeth's words echoed in my mind, growing louder and more insistent. I felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through my body, starting at my fingertips and working its way inward. "You see," Elizabeth continued, her voice now seeming to come from inside my head rather than from her lips. "I've tried this before, with previous owners, but they were too weak. Their will to live wasn't strong enough to complete the process. I tried to move, tried to run, but my body felt heavy and unresponsive. It was as if Elizabeth was somehow draining my energy, my very life force. But you're different, Olivia. You have such a strong spirit, such determination. I could feel it the moment you walked into that antique shop. You're exactly what I need. The tingling sensation had reached my chest now, and I could feel something being pulled out of me. Not physically, but something deeper, something essential. The process is quite simple, Elizabeth explained, her voice becoming clearer and stronger while mine felt weaker by the second. I take your life force, your soul, and you take my place in the doll. It's really quite elegant. I tried to speak, to protest, but only a faint whisper emerged from my lips. Don't fight it, Olivia. Fighting only makes it more painful. Just let go. Let me have what I need, and I promise your suffering will end quickly. But I couldn't let go. Something deep inside me, some primal survival instinct, was fighting against whatever Elizabeth was doing to me. I thought about my family, my friends, all the things I still wanted to do with my life. The resistance seemed to surprise Elizabeth. Her perfect features twisted into a mask of frustration. Stop fighting me, she hissed, her voice losing its musical quality and becoming harsh and commanding. You can't win this battle. I've had over a century to perfect this ability. But my defiance seemed to be disrupting whatever power she was using. The room stopped spinning, and I felt some strength returning to my limbs. I stumbled backward toward the door, but Elizabeth moved faster than should have been possible. She appeared directly in front of me, blocking my escape route. You're making this much harder than it needs to be, she said, her emerald eyes now glowing with an otherworldly fire. But I suppose I'll have to do this the traditional way. Elizabeth raised her small hands, and I saw that her fingernails had grown into sharp, claw-like points. She lunged toward me with inhuman speed, but years of self-defense classes kicked in. I dodged to the side and grabbed the heavy crystal vase from my dresser, bringing it down hard on Elizabeth's head. The impact should have shattered her porcelain skull, but instead, the vase bounced off as if she were made of solid stone. Elizabeth laughed, a sound that was now purely malevolent. Did you really think physical violence would work against me? I'm already dead, Olivia. I have nothing left to lose. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength, and I felt that draining sensation return, stronger than before. My vision began to blur, and I could feel my consciousness starting to slip away. But then I remembered something MRS Rodriguez had said. The doll had been returned 7 times. 7 families had managed to get rid of her somehow. There had to be a way. With the last of my strength, I broke free from Elizabeth's grip and ran toward the living room. She followed, moving with that unnatural speed, but I managed to stay ahead of her. I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table and quickly pulled up the forum posts I had been reading earlier. There had to be something, some clue about how the other families had escaped. Elizabeth appeared behind me, her hands reaching for my shoulders. You can't escape your fate, Olivia. Stop prolonging the inevitable. But as I scrolled frantically through the posts, I found what I was looking for. In one of the older entries, a woman named Hannah had mentioned something about fire. She said the only way to truly destroy the doll was to burn it, but not just the physical form. The fire had to be blessed, consecrated somehow. I remembered seeing a church just 2 blocks from my apartment. If I could get there. Elizabeth's fingers touched my neck, and I felt that terrible draining sensation begin again. But I had one last idea. I spun around and grabbed the antique oil lamp from my side table, the one my grandmother had given me years ago. It was filled with lamp oil, and there was a pack of matches right beside it. Stay away from me, I shouted, striking a match and holding it near the lamp's wick. Elizabeth recoiled as if I had struck her. Fire won't destroy me, she said, but for the first time. I heard uncertainty in her voice. I've survived fires before. Maybe, I said, backing toward the door while keeping the lit match between us. But you're afraid of it. I can see it in your eyes. Elizabeth's perfect features were twisted with rage now, all pretense of childlike innocence gone. You have no idea what you're dealing with, she snarled. I am eternal. I am beyond your understanding. You cannot win. But I was already at the door, lamp in one hand, lit match in the other. I fumbled with the locks, never taking my eyes off Elizabeth. If you leave this apartment, she called after me. "I'll follow you. I'll haunt your dreams, influence your thoughts, make your life a living hell until you submit to me." "Then I guess we'll see who's stronger," I replied, and ran out into the hallway. I could hear Elizabeth screaming behind me, a sound like breaking glass mixed with a child's tantrum, but I didn't look back. I ran down 3 flights of stairs, through the lobby, and out into the street. The church was exactly where I remembered it, an old Gothic structure with tall spires reaching toward the night sky. The front doors were locked, but there was a light in one of the side windows. Someone was still there. I pounded on the side door until it opened, revealing a kindly older priest. "Please," I gasped, still clutching the oil lamp. "I need help. I need you to bless this lamp, consecrate the flame. It's a matter of life and death." Father Michael, as he introduced himself, looked at me with concern. I must have appeared completely unhinged, wild-eyed, and clutching an antique lamp in the middle of the night. But something in my expression must have convinced him that I was in genuine need. He invited me inside, and after I explained my situation, he agreed to help. "I've seen stranger things in my years of service," he said kindly. "Evil takes many forms, and sometimes the most innocent-looking vessels contain the darkest spirits." He performed a blessing over the lamp, sprinkling it with holy water and reciting prayers in Latin. As he did, I felt a warmth spread through the oil, different from the unnatural heat I had felt from Elizabeth. This was pure, cleansing, protective. "Whatever you're planning to do," Father Michael warned me, "be very careful. Spiritual warfare is not something to take lightly." I thanked him and headed back toward my apartment, knowing that Elizabeth would be waiting for me. But now I had a weapon, a chance to end this nightmare once and for all. The apartment building was completely dark when I returned. Even the security lights in the lobby had been extinguished. As I climbed the stairs, I could feel Elizabeth's presence growing stronger, more oppressive. My apartment door was standing wide open, and a cold wind was blowing through the hallway despite all the windows being closed. The temperature dropped noticeably as I approached, and I could see my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Elizabeth was waiting for me in the living room, but she looked different now. The beautiful Victorian doll facade was gone, replaced by something far more terrifying. Her skin was pale and translucent, with dark veins visible beneath the surface. Her emerald eyes had turned black, and her perfect ringlets hung limp and stringy around her face. "You came back," she said, her voice now carrying the echo of centuries. "I knew you would. You can't escape your destiny, Olivia." "Maybe not," I replied, holding up the blessed lamp, "but I can choose how to face it." Elizabeth hissed and drew back from the light, confirming what I had suspected. The consecrated flame was affecting her, weakening whatever power she drew from. "You think that trinket will save you?" she spat. "I have existed for nearly 200 years. I have outlasted wars, plagues, the rise and fall of entire civilizations. What makes you think you can destroy me?" "Because I'm not trying to destroy you," I said, moving slowly toward the center of the room. "I'm trying to free you." Elizabeth's expression changed, confusion replacing the rage. "What? You said it yourself. You've been trapped in that doll for over a century, always moving from owner to owner, never able to truly live or die. That's not existence, that's torture." I could see uncertainty in her dark eyes now. "All those families that returned you, they weren't afraid of you. They felt sorry for you. A little girl who died too young, clinging to a world that had already moved on without her." "No," Elizabeth whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "I chose this. I wanted to stay. You were 8 years old," I continued gently. "You were scared and didn't want to die. But look what that fear has turned you into. Is this really the life you wanted?" Elizabeth's appearance began to shift again, the terrifying specter gradually giving way to something more human, more childlike. I just didn't want to be alone," she said, and for the first time, I heard genuine vulnerability in her voice. "You don't have to be alone," I told her. "There are people waiting for you, on the other side. Your family, other children who died young. They're all there, waiting to welcome you home." Tears began to flow down Elizabeth's translucent cheeks, tears that glowed with the same ethereal light I had seen around her earlier. "But I'm scared," she admitted. "What if there's nothing? What if I just disappear?" "Then you'll finally be at peace," I said softly. "No more jumping from house to house. No more terrifying innocent people. No more being trapped in a form that isn't really yours." I held out the blessed lamp, its flame dancing gently in the cold air. "It's time to let go, Elizabeth. It's time to go home." She stared at the flame for a long moment, and I could see the internal struggle playing out across her features. Fear warred with longing, desperation with hope. Finally, she nodded. "Well, will it hurt?" "I don't think so," I said honestly. "I think it will feel like going to sleep after being awake for far too long." Elizabeth smiled then, not the cruel expression from earlier, but the genuine smile of a child who had been given permission to rest. "Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for understanding." She walked toward me, no longer moving with that unnatural speed, just a tired little girl taking her final steps. When she reached the lamp, she paused. "Will you tell people about me? About what really happened?" "I'll tell them that you were just a scared child who got lost," I promised, "and that you found your way home." Elizabeth placed her small hands on the lamp, and the moment she touched the blessed flame, everything changed. The cold air warmed instantly. The oppressive feeling that had been weighing on the apartment lifted completely. And Elizabeth, she began to glow with that same pure, cleansing light that surrounded the flame. "I can see them," she whispered in wonder. "My mother, my father, they're here. They've been waiting." Her form was becoming less solid, more translucent, as if she were dissolving into the light itself. "Thank you," she said one final time. "Thank you for helping me remember who I really am." And then she was gone. Not vanished, not hidden, but truly gone. Passed on to whatever comes after life. Finally free from the prison she had created for herself. The lamp flickered once, then resumed its steady burn. But now it felt warm and comforting, not supernatural at all. I spent the rest of the night cleaning my apartment, removing any trace of Elizabeth's presence. In the morning, I would return to Emrys, Rodriguez's shop, but not to return a doll. I would go to tell her that the cycle had finally been broken. As dawn broke over the city, I realized that I had learned something important. Sometimes the things that terrify us most are just lost souls looking for a way home. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to look past our fear, we can help them find peace. The antique doll that had been Elizabeth Hartwell was now just an empty shell, beautiful porcelain and velvet that held no more power than any other toy. Emrys Rodriguez could sell it to any family without fear, because the spirit that had inhabited it for so long was finally at rest. I kept the blessed lamp as a reminder of that night, and of the lesson it taught me. Evil isn't always what it appears to be. Sometimes it's just pain that has lasted too long, fear that has grown into something monstrous, or love that has become twisted by loss. And sometimes, the most courageous thing we can do is show compassion to the very thing that frightens us most. That was 6 months ago. I never experienced anything supernatural in that apartment again. I moved to my new city as planned, taking the lamp with me as both protection and reminder. Sometimes, late at night, I think I can hear children laughing somewhere far away. The sound of young spirits finally free to play in whatever realm awaits beyond this world. I like to think that one of those voices belongs to Elizabeth Hartwell, no longer trapped, no longer afraid, but finally home where she belongs. And every time I tell this story, I hope that someone else out there who might be dealing with their own supernatural encounter will remember that sometimes the best way to fight a monster is to help it remember that it was once human too. My name is Sophia and I live in Toronto, Canada. What I'm about to tell you happened just 3 weeks ago, and I'm still trying to process everything that occurred. This is about a doll that I found, a doll that I thought was just a beautiful antique, but turned out to be something far more sinister. I work as a freelance photographer, specializing in vintage and antique items for estate sales and auction houses. It's a job that takes me to some interesting places, old mansions, abandoned properties, and sometimes storage facilities where forgotten treasures wait to be discovered. That's where this story begins. In a cold storage unit on the outskirts of the city, where I had been hired to photograph the contents of an estate that had been in storage for over 2 years. The storage unit belonged to the estate of an elderly woman named Mrs. Patricia Wong, who had passed away without any immediate family. Her belongings were being prepared for auction, and my job was to catalog and photograph everything of value. Most of the items were typical estate sale fare. Furniture from the 1960s, china sets, old books, jewelry boxes filled with costume pieces. But there was something about this particular storage unit that felt different from the moment I stepped inside. The air was colder than it should have been, even for a concrete storage facility in March. And there was a heaviness to the atmosphere, like the feeling you get right before a thunderstorm, when the air becomes thick and oppressive. I was about halfway through photographing the contents when I found her, sitting in an old wooden crate, wrapped carefully in yellow tissue paper. Was the most beautiful doll I had ever seen. She was about 2 feet tall, with perfect porcelain skin and the most striking emerald green eyes. Her auburn hair was styled in elaborate ringlets that fell past her shoulders, and she wore an exquisite Victorian dress made of deep burgundy velvet with intricate lace details. There was something almost magnetic about her. As a photographer, I'm drawn to beautiful objects, but this was different. I found myself unable to look away from those glass eyes. They seemed to follow me as I moved around the crate, as if she was aware of my presence. I picked her up carefully, expecting the usual cold hardness of porcelain, but her skin felt warm to the touch. Not just room temperature warm, but genuinely warm, as if there was something alive beneath the surface. I told myself it was just my imagination, perhaps the heat from the storage unit's lighting system. As I held her, I felt an overwhelming sense of sadness. Not my own sadness, but something external, as if the doll itself was mourning something or someone. It was such a strong emotion that I actually found tears welling up in my eyes. I had been commissioned to photograph all valuable items, and this doll was clearly an antique of some worth. But as I raised my camera to take the shot, something strange happened. The camera wouldn't focus properly. Every time I tried to capture the doll's image, the lens would hunt back and forth, unable to lock onto her face. I tried different angles, different lighting, even a different camera body, but the result was always the same. It was as if she didn't want to be photographed. Finally, I gave up on trying to get a clear shot and just documented her presence in the inventory notes. Victorian porcelain doll, circa 1850s, excellent condition, unknown maker. As I packed up my equipment, I couldn't stop thinking about her. There was something hauntingly beautiful about the doll, something that called to me on a level I couldn't explain. I found myself making a decision that I had never made before in my professional career. I was going to buy her myself. I contacted the estate lawyer handling Mrs. Wong's affairs and made an offer for the doll. It was more money than I should have spent, especially for something that wasn't even a confirmed antique, but I felt compelled to own her. The lawyer seemed surprised by my interest, but accepted my offer immediately. He mentioned that they had been having difficulty with that particular storage unit, some kind of electrical problems that their maintenance team couldn't explain. Lights flickering, temperature fluctuations, that sort of thing. Within a week, the doll was mine. I decided to call her Elizabeth, though I couldn't say exactly why that name came to mind. It just seemed to suit her somehow, as if she had whispered it to me in a dream. I brought Elizabeth home to my apartment, a converted loft space in an old textile building downtown. The space was perfect for my photography work, with high ceilings and huge windows that let in beautiful natural light during the day. I placed Elizabeth on the antique secretary desk in my living area, positioning her so she faced toward the windows. In the afternoon sunlight, she looked even more beautiful than she had in the storage unit. Her emerald eyes seemed to sparkle with life, and her auburn curls caught the light like spun gold. That first evening, I found myself talking to her as I worked on editing photos from other shoots. It felt natural, comfortable even, as if she was an old friend who had come to visit. I told her about my work, about the interesting pieces I had photographed that day, about my plans for the weekend. and I could have sworn that she was listening. Not in any supernatural way, at least not that I recognized at the time. But there was something about her presence that felt interactive, responsive. When I paused in my stories, it felt like she was encouraging me to continue. When I laughed at something, her expression seemed to brighten slightly. I went to bed that night feeling more content than I had in months. Living alone can be lonely sometimes, especially when you work freelance and don't have regular office interactions. Having Elizabeth there, even though she was just a doll, somehow made the apartment feel less empty. I should have paid attention to the dreams that started that very first night. I dreamed of a little girl in a burgundy dress, playing in a garden filled with roses. She was laughing and calling to someone just out of frame, someone I couldn't see but who seemed very important to her. The dream felt incredibly vivid, more like a memory than something my subconscious had created. But when I woke up, I didn't think much of it. Dreams are strange things, and as an artistic person, I've always had very visual, detailed dreams. It was the second night when things began to change. I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of soft humming. At first, I thought it might be coming from one of the other apartments in the building, but as I became more alert, I realized the sound was coming from my own living area. I got up and walked quietly toward the source of the sound. Elizabeth was exactly where I had left her on the secretary desk, but the humming seemed to be coming from her direction. It was a lullaby, sweet and melodic, but there was something hauntingly melancholy about it. The moment I stepped into the living area, the humming stopped. I stood there for several minutes, listening carefully, but there was only silence. Elizabeth sat motionless on the desk, her glass eyes reflecting the city lights from the windows. Everything looked exactly as it had when I went to bed. I convinced myself that it must have been the building settling, or maybe sound carrying from somewhere else in the building. Old buildings make all sorts of strange noises, especially at night when everything is quiet. As I turned to go back to bed, I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper, so soft it might have been just the wind. "Good night, Sophia." I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart suddenly pounding. I turned back toward Elizabeth, but she was exactly as I had left her, showing no sign of movement or awareness. I must have imagined it. Stress from work, maybe, or just the power of suggestion combined with the strange acoustics of the old building. I went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. Every small sound seemed amplified. Every shadow seemed to move. I found myself straining my ears, listening for that soft humming to return. When I finally did fall asleep, the dreams were more vivid than before. This time I dreamed of the same little girl, but she was older, maybe 11 or 12. She was lying in a bed, very sick, with fever burning in her cheeks. A woman who must have been her mother was sitting beside the bed, holding her hand and crying silently. The girl kept saying, "I don't want to go, Mama. I'm not ready. I want to stay here with you." And then darkness, cold and terrifying, reaching out for her with shadowy fingers. The girl fought against it with everything she had, clinging to consciousness, to life, to the warm hand holding hers. But the darkness was stronger, and slowly, inevitably, it began to pull her away from everything she loved. "No, I won't go. I won't." I woke up gasping, my heart racing as if I had been running. The dream had been so real, so emotionally intense, that it took me several minutes to remember where I was. And that's when I noticed that something had changed in my apartment. Elizabeth was no longer sitting on the secretary desk. She was standing on the floor beside my bed. I sat up slowly, afraid to move too quickly, afraid that any sudden motion might break whatever spell was keeping her upright. She was perfectly balanced, standing as naturally as if she had always been capable of walking around on her own. Her emerald eyes were fixed on my face, and in the dim light from the window, I could see an expression that hadn't been there before. Not just the painted features of a doll's face, but something that looked almost like concern. "Are you all right, Sophia? You were having a nightmare." The voice was clear and unmistakable. Not imagined, not misheard. Elizabeth had spoken to me, her lips moving slightly as the words emerged in a voice like silver bells. I should have been terrified. I should have run screaming from the apartment. But instead, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. You're her, aren't you? The girl from my dreams. Elizabeth nodded slowly. My name is Elizabeth Hartwell. I died of scarlet fever in Boston in 1847. I was 8 years old, and I wasn't ready to leave this world behind. She moved closer to the bed, her small feet making soft tapping sounds on the hardwood floor. Up close, I could see that her porcelain skin had taken on a more lifelike quality, as if blood was flowing beneath the surface. I've been bound to this form for over 170 years, passing from owner to owner, never able to truly live or die. Most people fear me when they discover what I am, but you're different, Sophia. You seem to understand. I don't know why I wasn't afraid. Perhaps it was the sadness in her voice, or the loneliness that radiated from her like heat from a candle. She didn't feel dangerous or malevolent. She felt lost. What do you want from me, Elizabeth? She looked down at her small hands, and I could see something that might have been shame in her expression. For so long, I've been trying to find a way back to life, to take someone's place in the world of the living. But every time I try, something goes wrong. The families always return me, always send me away. She looked up at me with those impossibly green eyes. But you're an artist, Sophia. You understand beauty. You understand the desire to create, to make something lasting. I thought maybe you would be different. Maybe you would be willing to help me. Help you how? Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment, as if gathering courage for what she was about to say. There's a way for me to return to life, to have a real body again, but it requires a willing sacrifice. Someone who would be willing to trade places with me, to let me have their life while they take my place in this porcelain prison. The words hit me like a physical blow. I finally understood what she was asking, what she had been working up to. You want me to die so you can live. Elizabeth's expression crumpled, and I saw tears begin to flow down her cheeks. Real tears, not the painted suggestion of sorrow. I know how it sounds. I know it's terrible to ask. But Sophia, you have no idea what it's like to be trapped like this, to watch the world change around you, to see everyone you care about grow old and die while you remain frozen in time. She moved even closer, and I could feel that strange warmth radiating from her porcelain skin. I've seen so much suffering, Sophia, so much pain and loss. Families torn apart by war, by disease, by simple human cruelty. And through it all, I've been unable to help, unable to comfort, unable to do anything but watch. The tears were flowing more freely now, leaving damp tracks on her perfect cheeks. All I want is a chance to live again, to feel the sun on my skin, to taste food, to sleep and dream and wake up to a new day. Is that so much to ask? I looked into her eyes and saw centuries of loneliness, of desperate hope, followed by crushing disappointment. Whatever Elizabeth had become, she had once been a frightened child who just wanted to stay with her family. But I also saw something else in those depths, a hunger that was growing stronger with each passing moment, a need that had consumed her for so long it had become the only thing she truly knew. I can't do that, Elizabeth. I can't give up my life, no matter how much I sympathize with your situation. Her expression hardened, and for just a moment, I saw something cold and calculating flash behind those emerald eyes. You say you can't, but you haven't really considered it. Have you, Sophia? What exactly are you giving up? A lonely apartment, a job that keeps you isolated from other people, a life with no real connections or meaning. Her voice was becoming more insistent, more persuasive. I could give you peace, Sophia. No more struggling to pay bills, no more worrying about the future, no more endless hours of solitude. You would simply rest, and I would make sure your body was put to good use. I could feel something happening as she spoke, a strange drowsiness beginning to cloud my thoughts. It was as if her voice was carrying some kind of hypnotic power, making her offer seem more reasonable with each word. Think about it, Sophia. When was the last time you were truly happy? When was the last time you felt like your life had real purpose? I could change all of that. I could make your existence meaningful by giving it to someone who would truly appreciate it. The drowsiness was getting stronger, and I found my eyelids growing heavy. Some part of my mind was screaming warnings, but that voice seemed to be coming from very far away. Just relax, Sophia. Let me take care of everything. You won't feel any pain, I promise. It will be like going to sleep, and when you wake up, you'll be at peace forever." Elizabeth was reaching toward me now, her small hands extended as if to embrace me. But instead of comfort, I felt a terrible coldness radiating from her touch. That coldness was like a shock of ice water, cutting through the hypnotic fog that had been settling over my mind. Suddenly I could think clearly again, could see what was really happening. Elizabeth hadn't changed at all from what she had always been. She was still trying to steal someone's life to satisfy her own desperate hunger for existence. The sadness and loneliness were real, but so was her willingness to murder an innocent person to get what she wanted. I jerked away from her reaching hands and rolled off the opposite side of the bed. "No, Elizabeth, I won't let you do this to me." Her beautiful features twisted into a mask of rage that was terrifying to behold. "You stupid girl. Do you think you have a choice in this matter? I've been perfecting this ability for over a century. No one has ever been able to resist me once I've set my sights on them." She began moving around the bed toward me, but her movements were no longer graceful and childlike. She moved with predatory purpose, her emerald eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light. "I've tried to be kind about this, Sophia. I offered you a peaceful transition, a chance to accept your fate with dignity. But if you insist on fighting me, I can make this much more unpleasant for both of us." I backed toward the living area, looking desperately for something I could use to defend myself. But what kind of weapon works against something that's already dead? Elizabeth laughed, a sound that was now completely devoid of warmth or humanity. "Run if you want, Sophia. Fight if it makes you feel better. But you can't escape what's coming. I am bound to you now, linked to your life force. No matter where you go, no matter how far you run, I will follow you until I have what I need." She was right behind me now, moving faster than should have been possible for someone her size. Her small hands reached out and grabbed my wrist, and the moment she touched me, I felt something essential being drained away. Not physical strength, but something deeper. My memories began to feel fuzzy around the edges, my sense of self becoming less solid. It was as if Elizabeth was literally stealing my identity, pulling my life force into herself. But then I remembered something from my photography training. Light. Cameras use light to capture images, to reveal truth, to show things as they really are. I fumbled for the light switches on the wall, flooding the apartment with every available bulb and fixture. The sudden brightness was almost blinding, but had an immediate effect on Elizabeth. She screamed and released my wrist, staggering backward as if the light was causing her physical pain. Her porcelain skin began to look translucent under the harsh illumination, and I could see dark veins pulsing beneath the surface. "You think light will save you." Her voice was distorted now, echoing strangely in the bright room. "I have survived under electric lights, under sunlight, under every kind of illumination you can imagine." But even as she spoke, I could see that the light was affecting her. She looked less solid somehow, less present, and I had an idea. I grabbed my most powerful photography light, a professional-grade LED panel that I used for product shoots. It was designed to replicate daylight at its most intense, and when I turned it directly on Elizabeth, she shrieked and threw her hands up to shield her face. "Stop it. Turn it off. You don't know what you're doing." But I was beginning to understand exactly what I was doing. Light reveals truth, and Elizabeth's truth was that she was nothing more than shadow and memory clinging to an inanimate object. I focused the light directly on her face, and I could see her features beginning to blur and shift. The perfect porcelain was cracking, revealing something dark and twisted underneath. "This isn't who you really are, is it, Elizabeth? This beautiful doll, this tragic little girl story. It's all just a mask, isn't it?" She snarled at me, her voice now containing harmonics that no human throat could produce. "You know nothing about what I am or what I've endured. Then show me," I challenged her. "Stop hiding behind this facade and show me what you really are." The light seemed to be growing brighter, or perhaps Elizabeth was growing darker by comparison. The Victorian dress began to look tattered and moth-eaten. The perfect ringlets became limp and stringy. The porcelain skin took on a gray, corpse-like pallor, and her eyes, Those beautiful emerald eyes became black pits that seemed to contain all the malevolence and hunger of her long, unnatural existence. You want to see the truth? Her voice was now a rasp that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I am what happens when death is denied, when the natural order is defied by stubborn will and desperate need. The thing that had been Elizabeth was changing rapidly now, becoming something far more terrifying than a possessed doll. She was growing taller, more angular, her limbs stretching to unnatural proportions. The beautiful dress became a shroud of shadows that writhed and moved independently of her body. I am hunger given form, Sophia. I am loneliness that has fed on itself until it became a cancer on the world. I am what you will become if you continue to resist me. But instead of being more frightening, this transformation was actually encouraging, because now I could see Elizabeth for what she really was, and it wasn't nearly as powerful as she wanted me to believe. She was pain, old pain that had been allowed to fester and grow until it consumed everything else. She wasn't some ancient evil or supernatural force. She was just a little girl who had been in agony for so long that she had forgotten how to be anything else. And pain, even centuries-old pain, could be healed. I turned off the harsh photography light and instead turned on the soft reading lamp beside my favorite chair. The warm, gentle illumination seemed to confuse the shadow thing that Elizabeth had become. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I told her quietly, "because I understand what you are now." She hissed and lunged toward me, but somehow her claws passed right through my body without causing any harm. What did you do?" I sat down in my chair and looked directly at her, no longer seeing a monster, but seeing instead a child in terrible pain. "I stopped being afraid of you, and fear was the only power you really had over me." Elizabeth staggered backward, her form beginning to shift and blur again. "You're dying, aren't you?" I continued. "Not in the way living things die, but fading. That's why you need to take someone's life force. You're running out of whatever energy has been sustaining you all these years." She glared at me with those black pit eyes, but I could see uncertainty creeping into her expression. "Every time a family returns you, every time someone rejects what you're offering, you get weaker. That's why you're getting more desperate, more willing to use force instead of persuasion." I stood up and moved closer to her, and this time she was the one who backed away. "How long do you think you have left, Elizabeth? How long before there's nothing left of you but an empty porcelain shell?" She opened her mouth to respond, but instead of words, only a keening wail emerged. It was the sound of grief and loss and unbearable loneliness, but underneath it all, I could hear something else. Relief. The shadow form was dissolving now, becoming less substantial with each passing second. But as it faded, I could see something else taking its place. The outline of a little girl, faint and flickering, but unmistakably human. "I'm so tired, Sophia," she whispered, and now her voice was purely that of a child. "I've been fighting for so long, and I'm so very tired." "I know," I said gently, "and it's okay to stop fighting now. But I'm scared. What if there's nothing after this? What if I just disappear forever?" I thought about that for a moment, then smiled at her. "Do you remember your family, Elizabeth? Your parents, your brother?" She nodded, and I could see tears beginning to flow down her translucent cheeks. "They loved you very much, didn't they?" "Yes," she whispered. "Do you think that kind of love just disappears when someone dies? Or do you think it continues somehow, waiting for the people we care about to join us?" Her eyes widened as if she had never considered that possibility before. "You think they're still there, waiting for me?" "I don't know for certain," I admitted, "but I think love is stronger than death. And I think they've been waiting for you to stop running long enough to find them again." Elizabeth looked down at her fading hands, then back up at me. "Will you help me, Sophia? I don't think I can do this alone." "Of course I will." I reached out and took her flickering hand in mine. It felt cool and insubstantial, like trying to hold onto morning mist, but I could still feel her presence. "Just close your eyes and let go of all that anger and hunger and fear. Think about your mother and father instead. Think about how much they loved you, how much they must have missed you all these years." Elizabeth closed her eyes, and I could see some of the tension leaving her small form. "I can almost see them," she said in wonder. "They look just like I remember, but they're not sad anymore. They're smiling." "Go to them," I urged her. "You've been lost long enough." She opened her eyes one last time and looked at me with an expression of pure gratitude. "Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for helping me remember who I used to be." And then she was gone. Not dramatically. Not with any supernatural effects or otherworldly phenomena. She simply faded away like a photograph left too long in sunlight, until there was nothing left but the faintest impression of warmth in the air. The porcelain doll that had housed her spirit for so long toppled over onto the floor with a soft thud. When I picked it up, it felt exactly like what it was supposed to be. Just painted porcelain and cloth and human hair, beautiful but completely inanimate. I kept Elizabeth's doll, but not out of any supernatural compulsion or fear. I kept it as a reminder of something important I had learned that night. Sometimes the most frightening things in our lives are just manifestations of pain that has been ignored for too long. And sometimes the best way to defeat a monster is to help it remember how to be human again. I never experienced any other supernatural events in my apartment. The doll sits on my bookshelf now, just another beautiful antique among many others. But occasionally, when the light hits her just right, I think I can see the faintest suggestion of a smile on her porcelain lips. Not the cruel smile of a predator, but the peaceful smile of a child who has finally found her way home. I still work as a freelance photographer, still spend a lot of time alone in my converted loft. But I don't feel lonely anymore, because I learned something valuable from my encounter with Elizabeth Hartwell. We are all connected by the love we share and the compassion we show to others. And sometimes, the greatest act of courage is not fighting the darkness, but helping it find its way back to the light. That happened 3 weeks ago, and I wanted to share this story because I think it's important for people to understand that not every supernatural encounter has to end in horror. Sometimes, if we're brave enough to look past our fear and see the pain underneath, we can help heal wounds that have been festering for far too long. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is simply listen and care and help someone remember that they are worthy of love. Elizabeth Hartwell was 8 years old when she died of scarlet fever in Boston in 1847. She spent 176 years lost and afraid, desperately trying to find her way back to life. But now she's home, reunited with the family that never stopped loving her, finally at peace in whatever realm waits beyond this one. And I like to think that somewhere, in whatever existence comes after this life, a little girl with emerald green eyes is playing in a garden full of roses, laughing with the pure joy of a child who is no longer afraid. That's my story. That's what happened when I found Elizabeth's doll in that cold storage unit. And if you ever find yourself face to face with something supernatural, something that seems threatening or malevolent, I hope you'll remember what I learned. Sometimes a monster is just someone who has been in pain for so long that they've forgotten how to be anything else. And sometimes, the greatest victory is not defeating the darkness, but helping it find its way back to the light. Thank you so much for watching this video and listening to my story. If this experience taught me anything, it's that the world is full of mysteries that we may never fully understand. But sometimes, understanding isn't as important as compassion. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more real supernatural experiences, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I read every single comment, so please let me know in the comments section below what country or city you're watching from, and what kind of paranormal stories you'd like me to share next. Do you want to hear about haunted locations, mysterious creatures, unexplained phenomena, or maybe you have your own supernatural experience that you'd like me to investigate? Drop your suggestions in the comments, and I'll do my best to create content that truly terrifies and amazes you. Remember to turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. And don't forget to share this video with friends who love a good scary story. Until next time, stay safe out there. And remember that sometimes the most frightening encounters can teach us the most valuable lessons about life, death, and what it truly means to be human. Sweet dreams, everyone.